I'm just going to give a quick introduction to our speaker. Laura Mandel is professor of English at Texas A&M University and director of A&M's Initiative of Digital Humanities, Media, and Culture, which was launched last year. Like many of us in the field of digital humanities, she began her career working with and producing print-based scholarship, and she continues to work in these traditional modes as well. She's well known to scholars of 18th and 19th century literature, having written Misogynist Economies, the Business of Literature in 18th century Britain, and published in leading journals in the fields of both 18th and 19th century literary studies. In the area of digital humanities, she remains breathtakingly busy and productive. In addition to directing IDHMC at Texas A&M, Dr. Mandel serves as director of the Advanced Research Consortium, that's ARC, which you all have heard about in the previous two events today, and as well, she directs 18th Connect. She's also principal investigator of a recent Andrew W. Mellon Foundation grant to improve the OCR of 18th century texts. She has held formative leadership roles in Nines and Romantic Circles and has chaired the MLA's Committee on Information Technology and lent leadership energy to dozens of other initiatives. And it occurs to me that I should, since we're not all here from the English departments, which I'm glad to see, I should note Romantic Circles has nothing to do with Match.com or anything like that. It refers to romanticism, the study of 19th century. So don't get your hopes up. Dr. Mandel spent the past 2 days leading meetings here on the campus of North Carolina State University that will chart the future development of ARC, the Advanced Research Consortium. As with so many things digital, one way to understand what ARC seeks to accomplish is by comparison and contrast with print culture, which we all know well. Over many years, humanities research has developed a well-oiled and, I'll say, reasonably efficient cycle. And that is, a researcher knows how to find scholarly work relevant to her research question. She produces new research in a known genre, usually a monograph or scholarly article, sends that work to a publisher, who sends it to reviewers. If it's published, the work is ingested, cataloged, and curated by professional librarians, and it's indexed and it's made known through reference sources. And it's then ready to re-enter this cycle of scholarly communication for the next researcher who comes along. While digital media and technologies hold great promise, they have also disrupted many nodes in that cycle, including publishing, peer reviewing, bibliographical control, the sorts of things we've been discussing here today. One way to understand what we seek to accomplish with ARC is the rebuilding of this cycle in digital space. And this is a topic that Dr. Mandel will address in her lecture. The title of her talk today is The End of the Print Humanities, Retooling the Academy. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Actually, I think, unfortunately, maybe chose the most tendentious part of a book I'm writing to give today. But that means that you're allowed to throw tomatoes, okay? You're just welcome. And I actually do want, as with a digital tool, when you build a digital tool, you want everybody to come and use it and break it so you can see how it breaks. This is called, my book manuscript is a manifesto in the Blackwell Manifesto series, and it's called Breaking the Book. But I'd like you to break my Breaking the Book, if you can. And this is the most tendentious version I could possibly give, just to make it exciting. So, Espen Arseth has written that for most people with whom he discusses his work, humanities informatics is decidedly an oxymoron. Nothing could be humane about the mechanical structuring of information. For just a few moments here, I want to suggest that the phrase digital humanities, though similarly self-contradictory, is in worse shape than Arseth's term, that it is indeed a misnomer in even a deeper way. The digital humanities has come over the last 10 years to designate some mixture of humanities computing, digital editing, public humanities, and new media studies. But it too is still, quote, humanities-based. The lead article in Matthew Gould's recent collection, Debates in Digital Humanities, is an essay by Matthew Kirschenbaum, arguing and explaining why digital humanities has arisen primarily in English departments. He Humanities, as I have argued in the preceding chapters of the book that you haven't read, were ushered in and depend for their vitality upon the medium of mass print, which arose in the early 19th century. And this collection of debates appears in the medium of a book, no matter what its topic, digital work, and no matter what kind of digital surrogate of it is later made available. There will be one, I understand, but it's primarily in book form. And this collection of debates appear, and no matter what kind of digital surrogate of it is later made available, Gould's debates demonstrates the antagonisms within media studies, humanities, the media studies, humanities, computing mixture. And these, I would argue, represent to the point of parody, almost, antagonisms endemic to the humanities in general. Insofar as book-based, Gould's collection exemplifies and enacts tensions with which book-based humanities disciplines are riven. Lisa Spiro's essay in the collection provides a counterview to what I'm arguing here. She beautifully and powerfully argues that the dissensus visible in Gould's debates is necessary to the health of a new field. While I do agree that self-questioning is healthy, I would like to suggest that the disagreements visible in this mass-printed collection of essays are not simply a matter of self-critique, or perhaps that self-critique has reached its end, as Bruno Latour maintains. The critiques bound together as chapters are not simply a matter of healthy self-questioning, but in fact are debilitating. This is my cover, isn't it beautiful? Okay. In this talk, I summarize my manifesto's arguments, which collectively maintain that the book medium affects its contents in the field of literary and cultural studies in ways that many humanist operators of this technology, even digitally savvy ones, have not recognized. And additionally, that the failure to recognize the meaning of medium, its implication in every utterance on every printed page, is pulling us apart, driving us down, and participating via deconstruction in the destruction of institutionalized humanities. That sounds self-accusatory and masochistic, and I think we've heard that argument before. I'm a print-based humanist too, will be participating in that manifesto in the same book-based blindnesses which I'm suggesting are lethal. Apocalyptic, yes, I'm trying to be apocalyptic intentionally, to be provocative, but masochistic, no. Because the rough beast slouching toward the U.S. Academy may not resemble a vicious tiger so much as William Blake's kitty cat or some other sweet meme. My principal arguments have been these. First, that the authority in the book that you haven't read, First, that the authority of print misleads us intellectually into imagining that some deeply and obviously erroneous statements are true. I will give an example that is not print, but rather exemplifies print authority in another medium. John Berger has done work that's similar. I've heard a comedian's reaction to early exposure of the Rodney King video. People remember the Rodney King video? Okay. Quote, "Put down the goddamn video camera and come help me." Who are you behind the writing of the book, and what are you doing right now? Because the activity in which you are engaged in the time of producing the writing that is to be printed and the print that is to be mass distributed may implicate you in the very phenomenon which you call, in the name of critical thinking, a crime or a moral outrage. So to give an example I've already discussed elsewhere, Terry Eagleton's attack on Gayatri Spivak in the London Review of Books was, what was he doing in the moment of handwriting, typing, or keying in the subsequent moments of delegated print production and mass distribution? What was he doing that differed from what he attacked her for doing or not really doing? Nothing. But the delusion instilled by mass print, as my manifesto has argued, is that critique is a voice from nowhere, appears to be, and that the activity of printing is a voicing, a physical act with political effects, like the sound of protest moving in waves through the air to a massive agglomeration of ears, connected to minds that, impinged upon by those sound waves, are changed. That is not a delusion that was shared by participants in early, small-run coterie print culture. Satirists such as Swift and Pope satirized equally the voice and target of critique. Cassinus, you'll remember, who repeats it exactly, Streffen's iteration of that timeless truth printed in Jonathan Swift's poem called The Lady's Dressing Room. This is really the humanities at its best, right? Oh, Celia shifts, is himself embrowned because too depressed by his discovery of Celia's digestive functions to bathe himself anymore. The satirists, I'm arguing, understood that they too had to justify their position as they wrote and published. The deliberate ellipses in so much early 18th century printed literature suggest the hyper-awareness of eyes on a page, rather than the imaginary belief that we give concerns of ethnic, racial, and sexual others a voice when we critique, as Tara McPherson does she has an argument in the debates on digital humanities about the whiteness of Unix computer systems and their structures. McPherson attacks liberal humanism's failure to impact racism through structural change, as well she should, but she does so while imagining that a humanities department and humanities structures, including the codex, are the place to do that, and that they can affect structural change. She does so while imagining that she is not committing precisely the same failure as she writes, publishes, and mass distributes about, which in fact she is. Her voice was heard by no one because it is a printed page, and the alleged massiveness of the distribution will likely be the top 300 libraries where the collection will mostly remain unread, and where it will certainly not be read by children in the ghetto who could, like Frederick Douglass, become activists working against racism because inspired by a book. In his case, he was inspired by a book. It was The Columbian Orator, a collection that really was mass printed, and at the very beginning of the mass print era, a collection designed to teach elocution. It was focusing on the fact that voice doesn't come through printed pages. Inspiring activism does happen, but the authority of critique, based in its implicit claim to not be committing the crime it exposes, is based on belief that it always gets out into the world, making itself heard on a mass scale. If the author's voice has been a term dominating even in historical and sociological bibliographic studies, giving the voice to subalterns has dominated politicized literary histories ever since the proliferation of the term in anthologies of minority literatures during the 1980s and 90s, with titles such as Other Voices, Women's Voices, etc. But printed documents do not actually make sound. It is a catachresis on the order of and connected with Milton's blind mouths to imagine that flat pages adorned with typographical images make noise. Milton's catachresis is the figure usually used to define the term. Mouths do not actually have eyes. Faces do, but not mouths. So it doesn't make sense to call mouths blind. And similarly, the pages of a printed codex don't have mouths and throats. So it doesn't make literal sense to see them either as silent about a particular issue or as giving voice to any of its content. Peter Schillingsburg, who is currently working on digital editing after having been a print editor for most of his career, discusses truthfully his print edition of Thackeray, quote, of which I imagine about 90 copies will ever be sold, while we live on a planet with approximately 6 billion people. This is poignant. He spent a large part of his life working on that edition. We as a discipline hallucinate our own publications alive, because that means they are out there in the world among those 6 billion people doing something. But they're not. They sit silently, immobile, on shelves. A fact made most poignant to us when we take out an old book from the library, noticing that we are checking it out for the first time, or that the pages of an edition in a rare books room have never been cut. That book is truly a bear in the woods. It's not just that the essays in Gold's collection on whiteness in computer configurations or hacktivism, which itself needs some usability studies before claiming its impact. It's not just that they are imagining that they have an impact, which unfortunately they don't. It's that their attacks, their critiques, what the humanities in English literary and cultural studies have been doing for the last 20 or 30 years, that those critiques depend upon its hallucinated reach, effectiveness, sound, and voice. This kind of critique was established generically before the emergence of digital humanities as a field during the late 20th century. It's a genre, I would argue, of moral one-upmanship. The genre was developed in book reviews, the rant and sniping of which was pioneered by Terry Eagleton. But may have even begun in Gayatri Spivak's early essay about Wordsworth's Prelude, or Marjorie Levinson's small manifesto, Wordsworth's great period poems, may have begun with the beginning of Louis Dorisism, in fact. Wordsworth didn't mention his affair and a child in France in the Prelude. He didn't mention the factories and pollution in the Wye Valley in his great poem Tintern Abbey. He wasn't just doing something else at the time, these people argued. He was in denial, and moreover, trying to force us to be in denial with him. AKA, he was purveying ideology. The critics' claim then was, I'm writing about the issues that you deny in your writing, and the difference between me and you, the fact that I'm not in denial, is staked upon what happens in the real world as a result of writing, printing, publishing, mass distribution of my text, which attacks you. Only the problem is, the effect of not being in denial about racism is not achieved by sheer publication of a book, Attack and Denial. All that has been done is a book has been published. You too were not overturning racist structures. You too were doing something else, even though thinking about racism. You too were perpetuating academic structures of promotion and merit races that still privilege white men. Meanwhile, the chambermaids at the hotel I just left, wash your bed linens. I want to emphasize what I'm not saying here. I'm not saying to the kinds of critique that are dominant in English departments right now, don't write about racism. It doesn't do any good. I'm not saying that. That's not true. Such writings, my own writings, are feminist. Such writings help. I believe, for instance, that the fact that in Britain, slavery was abolished almost a century before it was in the U.S. has to do precisely with the anti-slavery movement, with much of which took place in published pamphlets and poetry. I'm only saying this: the critique that has dominated literary and cultural studies for the last 30 years has taken the form of insisting that participating in a structure, writing, publishing, implicates you in a crime. And the fact that this is said by someone participating in the same structure has gone unnoticed. Precisely unlike Swift, who noticed that Cassie and Strephon, horrified by poop, themselves defecate. When Tara McPherson attacks computers for their intrinsic structural racism in this new debates in digital humanities, it seems as if she is attacking a structure in which she doesn't participate, or at least isn't participating as she wrote, published, distributed, and as we read. But her structure, the technology of the book, cares nothing for differences in ethnicity and race, just like computers. It's caring nothing similarly criminal? And if so, if criminals can only be attacked by criminals, then what the hell are we doing? What is the value? What is its value other than to tear down what humanists do? I don't think the public was born yesterday. I remember a first-year student saying to me, well, if you believe Swift, this was when I was early teaching this kind of ideological criticism, well, if you believe that Swift only conveyed this horrible ideology, why are you teaching it? There are, of course, other things that humanists do in books and classrooms, many other things besides critique. And some of them are on the order of abolitionist poetry. They have good effects. It is tantamount to blaming the victim to say that we have lost the culture wars and are being defunded due to our own fault. That said, however, there were things we could have been doing instead of moral one-upmanship, unfairly called critical thinking. The thinking was not critical enough. We criticized the ideologies and infrastructural biases of others while not critiquing our own. Eagleton attacks Spivak without concomitantly attacking himself or giving up the whole valueless, allegedly intellectual enterprise. There were things we could have been doing should social reform, as opposed to publishing criticism in the field of literary and cultural studies, have been what we wanted to do. Many other things. To put this in perspective of the longue durée, John Guillory wrote an article about public intellectuals in the humanities many years ago, in which he argued that the middle class no longer had a need for literary studies. Knowledge of high literature and culture had been at one time a legitimating force for the middle classes. One marketed one's own self-worth and sense of self-worth at cocktail parties by knowing something about Matthew Arnold. With the advent of the professional managerial classes, Guillory argues, that kind of legitimation is no longer needed. I think at that moment, and perhaps now, Guillory might see literary and cultural studies as a luxury no longer needed now that its function in implicit credentialing, not in explicit credentialing, is no longer needed. Let's just pretend for a moment that that's broadly true, though I'm not sure, to be honest, but let's just pretend. It's like the whole God thing is dead, intellectually, a done deal with Nietzsche. But as I drive around my hometown and see churches bigger than shopping malls, I have to ask, really? Similarly, whenever graduate students in literature, in English departments that I know of have had book sales, the business students come to buy anthologies. People may be flocking to art history classes, not for the image per se, but to get the belles lettrism that they will not find in our classes. I'm not saying that we should believe in God, even though there are lots of these churches, and I'm not saying that we should be teaching belles lettres classes. I'm just trying to see how things are working here.